several days into the slaughter, an informed Israeli strategic analyst writing in Israel's most respected newspaper, Haaretz, said, "The IDF, which planned to attack buildings and sites populated by hundreds of people, did not warn them in advance to leave, but intended to kill a great many of them, and succeeded." Benny Morris, that sometime historian, full-time propagandist, could barely conceal his pride at what he called Israel's highly efficient air assault on Hamas. Not all Israelis were so impressed. The Israeli columnist B. Michael wrote that the dispatch of helicopter gunships and jet planes, quote, over a giant prison and firing at its people is not exactly an act of heroism. Who they fire on in those first couple of days? Well, Gideon Levy gives us an idea, the Haaretz correspondent in the West Bank in Gaza. He says they fired on 70 traffic cops, or I should say killed 70 traffic cops at their graduation ceremony. Young men in desperate search of a livelihood who thought they'd found it in the police and instead found death from the skies. As the massacre unfolds, Israeli commentators and mainstream newspapers can barely conceal their glee and gloating. Gaza is to Lebanon as the second sitting for an exam is to the first, a second chance to get it right. And this time round, Israel has hurled Gaza back not 20 years, as it promised to do in Lebanon, but, gloats this commentary, we hurled Gaza back into the 1940s. Electricity is available for only a few hours a day. Another Israeli columnist, and notice incidentally as I quote them, they're all fully aware the war is about restoring that deterrence capacity, which was diminished after the defeat in Lebanon. There are no secrets here. Another commentator gloats, Israel regained its deterrence capacity because the war in Gaza has compensated for the shortcomings of the 2006 Lebanon war. A third commentator says, there is no doubt that Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah is upset these days. There will no longer be anyone in the Arab world who can claim that Israel is weak. And indeed, who would dare now say that Israel is weak? Who can doubt Israel's strength and courage? Who cannot be impressed when Israel seals off the most densely populated place on earth into a ghetto, when it then deprives this open-air prison, this concentration camp, of food, water, electricity, and medicine? Who can't be impressed when Israel then reduces this starving population to abject misery, when it then comes in with its jet planes, helicopter gunships, tanks, armored personnel carriers, when it then rains crematoria from the sky, incinerating the defenseless population with white phosphorus, when it blows up mosques, ambulances, hospitals, and UN compounds? Who can't be impressed by courageous, heroic, strong Israel, when it leaves the wounded to bleed to death and shoots the survivors hoisting white flags? Who would now dare call Israel weak? Certainly not Thomas Friedman of the New York Times, who yesterday expressed his thrill at Israel's strategy. He harkened back, as all the commentators have, to that war in Lebanon. He said that Hezbollah had created a very flat military network built on small teams of guerrillas and mobile missile batteries, deeply embedded in the local towns and villages. Israel had no choice. They had to bomb those Hezbollah targets because they were deeply embedded among the civilians. And then he went on to say, that's a good thing, because it will educate, his words, it will educate the civilian populations that this is what's going to happen if you dare defy Israel. He says it's not a pretty picture, but that's the way it works. You have to deliver to these populations an education. And he says, if Israel now is out to educate Hamas by targeting these populations, these civilian infrastructure, the civilian population, they may have achieved their aim. Now is not the time to go into everything Mr. Friedman wrote, leaving aside that he's advocating now terror bombing against civilian populations in the most respected newspaper in the United States, or what was the most respected newspaper in the United States. Just on a factual level, the simple facts. What he's saying about the war Hezbollah waged is an outright lie. There have been numerous studies done of how that war was fought. Was Hezbollah concealing itself in a civilian population? Were all those civilian deaths during the Lebanon war, those 1,000 civilians who were killed, was it due to the fact, as we hear over and over and over again, because Hezbollah was concealing itself among the civilian population and Israel had no choice? Here's what Human Rights Watch had to say. On some occasions, Hezbollah fired rockets from within populated areas, allowed its combatants to mix with Lebanese civilian population, or stored weapons in populated civilian areas. Such violations, however, were not widespread. We found strong evidence that Hezbollah stored most of its rockets in bunkers and weapon storage facilities located in uninhabited fields and valleys. That in the vast majority of cases, Hezbollah fighters left populated civilian areas as soon as the fighting started, and that Hezbollah fired the vast majority of its rockets from pre-prepared positions outside villages. Some of you may say, well, that's Human Rights Watch. It's a liberal organization. Frankly, I wish it were, but it's not. But then the U.S. Army War College did its own study based entirely on the testimonies of Israeli officers and soldiers. What did this U.S. Army study find about the war in 2006? I'm going to quote to you in full. Hezbollah is often described as having used civilians as shields in 2006. And in fact, they made extensive use of civilian homes as direct fire combat positions and to conceal launchers for rocket fire into Israel. Yet, the villages Hezbollah used to anchor its defensive system in southern Lebanon were largely evacuated.